Hi. Okay, we are back for reasoning in this video. So, first of all, we're going to review all of our fallacies that we've talked about this semester. So, let's start with red herring. A red herring, remember, it introduces an irrelevant point in order to avoid the question. And then special pleading, that's where we have an unjustified exception. Someone may make an exception for what they do from the rule. So they have that exception in special pleading. And then ad hominem, it attacks character or the motive instead of the argument. It's a personal attack. And then, excuse me, genetic fallacy, it condemns the argument from its origins, from its beginning, where or how or who began it. So not the argument itself, it condemns where it began. Okay, tu quoque, that is the U2. It dismisses someone's point on an issue because that person is inconsistent in that very thing. And again, we use that one with the smoking example. So that's the U2 fallacy, that is just dismissed automatically because they have fault in that area. Okay, the next one is faulty appeal to authority. It's an appeal to someone who has no special knowledge in that area being discussed. And then we did that one with our car's computer. If we took it to our mechanic and he said, "Oh, it's fine," or this is the problem with it. That may or may not be a good thing. It could be a faulty appeal to authority because they're an expert but not an expert in that particular thing. And if someone is in an argument and they pull in a source for proof when it's not necessarily an authority that would have been used in that's the faulty appeal. So that's the fallacy there. Okay, the next one, appeal to the people. This is claims that my viewpoint is correct because many people believe it. Okay, and that in itself is a fallacy. Just because many people believe it doesn't make it true. Okay, the next one is a straw man. This is changing or exaggerating an opponent's position just to make it easier to refute. So that's the changing or exaggerating a point from the opposition. Okay, circular reasoning. This is the restating of an argument, just using different words. So say this argument and then restate it again and bring it back around just with a different explanation. That's circular reasoning. Equivocation. It's the changing of the meaning of a word in the middle of an argument. So there were several examples in our book, and your brain sometimes picks up on that. It goes, wait, there's a pause there of that's a different use of that word. So that's equivocation, when they have the same word but they use different meanings throughout the argument. Okay, let's see. I have loaded questions. So loaded questions. These are two questions in one, but one is typically hidden. And we use the court case so you can go back and read that if you don't remember that one, that the attorney was asking a question to see if he had wiped his fingerprints off that gun that was in that court case, and he was so shocked he didn't actually stop and question to see, wait, he's making an assumption in that question, but one is hidden. So that's the loaded question. Okay, slippery slope. This assumes that if we take one step, and you'll see this a lot right now in current events, if we take one step, that nothing will stop us from taking a series of other steps. So if this happens, then oh my goodness, all of this is going to happen as well. That's that slippery slope. Part to whole. So what is true of the part must also be true of the whole thing together. That's that assumption that, oh, if this part is true, then the whole thing is true. And then whole to part is what is true of the whole must also be true of each of its individual parts. And again, that's an assumption on making that statement as well. And one of that is this, say this basketball team was amazing. Every one of their players must be awesome. Well, just because the team as a whole is extremely talented, that doesn't mean every single player is a perfect player or a great player, because you can definitely have a weak player on that. So that's that, assuming just because the whole is that every part is true of that whole. And then the either or fallacy. So when someone insists that we must choose between only two things when there are in fact more alternatives, that's the either or fallacy. There's not just either, it's not just either or, but the person that is using this fallacy makes us feel that way, and then our emotions come involved, and that, oh, it's only this or this, it's life or death, when there could very well in fact be more. And if there are more alternatives, that's where it's a fallacy. It could very well be either or. Your mother may give you an either or solution, and there is just either or. But when it becomes a fallacy, an either or fallacy is when there are in fact more alternatives to choose. Okay, so that's our that's what we've covered so far. And in this last week, you read lessons 22 and 23 with generalization and hasty generalization. Now, I talked about we have left making assumptions fallacies, and we're now into kind of statistical fallacies. That's the section of the book that we are in now. So first of all, let's define generalization. I'm on page 109 in my book. I know we have several editions in mine, but I'm on lesson 22, and in my book that's 109. And I have the book that has the yellow on top and the green on the bottom. So my yellow's on top and the green on the bottom. The different edition, this is green and this is yellow, but mine's yellow on top, green on the bottom. So if you have that one, I'm on page 109. Okay, a generalization is, it takes a sample from a class of things, so a set of things or a group of things, and then using the characteristics from that sample says something about everything in that group. Okay, so we could say Challenge A'ers are geography masters. So we make a generalization because we studied geography intensely in Challenge A. So we make a using that piece of information from that sample, we make a statement about the whole thing. So a class, or the group that we talk about in a generalization, is a group of people or things which all have some common characteristics. So we could say teachers, and then even more specifically a certain grade of teachers, 5th grade teachers, 4th grade teachers, homeschoolers. Your book uses salesmen, used car salesman, all the jelly beans. So that's a generalization taken from a class, and it takes a characteristic from that class and makes that. Now, so there's nothing absolute or certain about a generalization, because we're taking a group that's similar and some characteristic that we see common, that's a common in it, and we're making that generalization. So it's not absolutely certain. It's either strong or weak. So their generalizations are not certain. They're either a strong generalization or a weak generalization. And it relies upon samples of that group or class. It does not rely on the study of every single member of that class. So say we go back to the Challenge A one. Challenge A'ers are whizzes at geography. So we know from the characteristics of what's studied in Challenge A that they all studied geography. It's either strong or weak based on that particular group. So And any generalization can be adjusted or overthrown just by a single contrary case. So let's take our group, Sherman Challenge A, the year 2019 to 2020. Okay, so that's our class. So our class of Sherman. So if we said that every Challenge A-er of the Sherman campus is perfect in their geography skills of knowing every country, and then we find one person in our class or group that doesn't have Asia mastered, we can no longer say that would be a weak generalization to say we're perfect. We could say they are very strong, or almost all of them, and that's where you can be adjusted. If just finding one case that's different, you have to adjust your generalization, and a generalization becomes stronger as the sample grows larger and more representative of that class. So we all make generalizations. So we do that just in life, how we are. But they're either strong or weak. And the more we know about a class or group and those characteristics, the stronger our generalizations can be. Okay, so I'm going to go over to hasty generalization. A hasty generalization is generalizing about a class based on a small or poor sample. So ways that they become hasty is that you have too small of a sample. They don't take a large enough representation of that class. And then it's not a representative sample. It's not true that the information they have that really doesn't speak to the class that they're looking at or to the group that they're looking at. So let's see. I wanted to compare generalization to assumption. So we've been talking about these last fallacies that we've been talking about. This last section are the making assumption of fallacies. An assumption, so let's review that. An assumption is something taken for granted or accepted as true without proof. Okay, we just automatically assume it based on something someone said, and we automatically assume that. That's when we read that story of the man that was in the country in your book, and it just had you make when you heard that, you automatically assumed he spoke that language. You automatically assumed just by things that we read. So it's when we take something for granted and accept it as truth without proof of it. And then to compare that to a generalization, that takes a sample from a class of things and then using this characteristics about saying what could be true of that. So they're a little bit different. I mean, they have some similarities for sure, because we're not individually going on every little thing to see if it's true, but they are different because this one we have some facts about it and we're making a generalization about it based on those facts, where an assumption is we're accepting this as true without proof. So there are some similarities, but there are some differences. So just to compare those two, a generalization and a fallacy. Again, we're in the statistical fallacies in this section of the book. This week you're going to read lessons 24 and 25, analogies and weak analogies on those, and then you're going to complete the exercises with those. Continue to look in the news and see if you can find some fallacies around you, and just being able to recognize them. That's huge. So I think that's it for reasoning. So I will see you in the next video.